On this week's Bet the Process podcast, we have on ESPN's Bill Connelly to officially usher in the college football season, where he will tell us all about his rankings, what he changed this year, how he deals with things like transfers, etc. And Rufus even gives a pick. So, with that, let's start the process. Welcome to another episode of the Bet the Process podcast. It is the official first college football episode of the year. We will have Bill Connelly on from ESPN of the SP Plus rankings. Rufus, are you betting this week?
I am. We have quite a lot of money bet.
Oh, wow. Are you going to do a trip through
Uh,
college for the crew that you were on a heater last year and they want to see you on a heater again this year?
well, okay, I'll give out one big play that I like this week, and it's with the team that I think a lot of people are going to be a little bit interested in, and I'm going to take Colorado +4 against Georgia
Ooh,
Tech. And obviously,
interesting.
we know they lost a lot, but they have a lot of talent coming in too, and we'll see if
Where do you
if
think your
this
alpha is
time.
coming from there?
I think that there's Well, I think that Colorado's getting docked a lot for losing Shador, for losing Travis Hunter, and I mean they've lost a lot of production there clearly. But uh, I think that the narrative, I think the number, like, this is a move of like two touchdowns or more from where it would have been at the end of last season. So I think it's kind of an over move, and I do think you have an off season with a lot of narratives developing, and so I think that lines kind of, I don't want to say they have time. Like, I do think the narratives, I think people can overreact to narratives and kind of not anchor as much on sort of the base and like what the team's production was like in the past. And I think that, I mean, you see this in the NFL. I still remember that one year. You remember when the Eagles had Michael Vick and they brought in, like, who was it? They signed Nasi Asamoah. They basically won free agency. They brought in, like, this was maybe one of Andy Reid's last years with the Eagles, and everybody was like, "This is going to be the best team." And what, they went like 8-8 or 9-7, and it's I think it's I think these narratives can kind of get overblown. I do, and at least that's what I'm saying, because I think Colorado certainly is not as good as they were last year, but I think my numbers have them still as a small favorite here.
Well, Georgia Tech was a team that people thought was playing much better at the end of last year, also, right? Because they had that really good game against Georgia, and so
Mhm.
there's probably that narrative too
The
that they're a
recency
little,
there.
yeah, a
And
little
when you
bit.
look, and when you look generally, it's not like what a team was at the end of the season has so much more predictive value versus what they were at the beginning of last season. I mean, obviously, if you have a
Ooh,
lot of
that's
different players
interesting.
playing, but I mean, I haven't actually re-looked at this recently, but that certainly has been that's it. That generally is the case across sports if you're looking at a team level stuff.
How many games are you guys betting this week?
Um, I don't know. We're a handful. Like,
And are you down on all those now?
we are down on most of them. Yeah. Like, I think we filled some totals today. And I mean, we have a nice chunk of change. We've upped our volume from last year. We're trying to get down much bigger positions.
So
So
give me the reason why, because I feel like college football was something that you somewhat thought that you were thinking about potentially not doing anymore, right?
maybe this is an overreaction to last season's success where we
Oh, got it.
returned.
Because last year you did so well. So
No,
now
I mean, we
you're,
returned. Well, we had a small losing year in 2023, and then last year we returned like 8.5% over the course of the year, which is, you know, more than I would have expected to return. I didn't make any major changes, but I think we're also incorporating some other opinions aside from Massey Peabody as well. And so I think it's kind of nice to have, when sort of there's kind of confirmation. I feel like it makes sense to be more aggressive. I mean, also our bankroll, like, we should be betting more. It's still a very tiny percentage of what our annual volume is across all sports, college football, just because there's not as many games. But if we're gonna bet it, we might as well bet it pretty big.
Like it. Anything else you want to give the people before we bring in Bill Connelly?
No, I'm generally not as confident early season, especially with all the transfer stuff. I think that there are some spots, but there's also a lot of things that, I don't pick up on with,
So
especially with totals. Like, so I'm not really my own total stuff is I'm not weighting that at all right now because, you have new coordinators coming in on teams and I'm not the qualitative guy that knows that this guy is when he was with East Carolina, you know, had an offense that just slowed down the pace, right? That's not my strength. So I'm kind of okay with just waiting that out a little bit. And so I mean, and it does show up in the numbers that the Massey Peabody stuff has a little more value relative to the market as the season kind of progresses. The first few weeks it still has some value, but you're going to see bigger disagreements. But I would regress more to the market number, week 0, week 1, week 2, than like say week 7 or week 8.
how are you dealing with like the rule changes on your total stuff?
So in general, what I do is I don't take a stand on the sort of scoring environment overall. So if the average total is 54, I want mine to be right around that area. And like I wait to like, recent years scoring environment stuff, but I will adjust up or down if I'm too high. And there's a little bit of art to it too. If I think that the scoring environment that the market is using, in essence, the market's implied score environment is too high, I'll be okay having mine a little bit lower, or vice versa. You see that occasionally late in the season where, maybe the market is maybe underreacting to like the impact of like the colder temperatures or something like that, or overreacting. So I I don't take a stand on that though. My whole thing is trying to see how fast a team is relative to another team, not sort of on an absolute scale.
Um, I was just joking. I don't know if there's any rule changes in
No,
scoring.
it's NFL has the rule changes.
I know. I
Yeah,
was
you're just
just
seeing. I was literally like, oh shit, were there college football rule changes? I don't know.
okay. Well, let's welcome in Bill Connolly, and we'll talk to you guys all again next week, where maybe Rufus will give you more picks and continue on the Rufus heater.
Bet, bet, bet the price.
We now welcome in Bill Connolly to the Bet the Process podcast. Bill, thanks for joining us. It's that time of year. What are you most excited for? I mean, this is the real. I assume you watched the Iowa State Kansas State game.
Oh yeah, first half of slippery turf, wet ball, just everybody falling on themselves, and then a real game breaking out in the second half. It was kind of the perfect introduction to college football, I would say.
What do you think of the idea of them playing this like important conference game between like two teams that could be like right on the cusp of the college football playoffs so
Yeah,
early and in Ireland?
I mean, I get if people object to it. It's kind of like how there's a let in tennis. We want to make sure there's a real, this is a real serve that comes in. Like you want that to be a real result. But I don't know. I didn't mind it at all. I thought it celebrated that rivalry nicely. I still think it's silly that the Big 12 has set them up to not play that game every year. But it celebrated it under the radar rivalry, so I'll get over it. And in the end, I mean that the way those games usually play out is exactly like that, no matter what continent they're on. So I felt like it was a pretty just result.
So looking at SP Plus, obviously Bill, well known to our 7 listeners, hopefully at this point, inventor of the SP Plus rankings, which it's funny, like there is you're getting like the residual content built on top of SP Plus, where people are using and referencing
Oh,
SP Plus
yeah.
for different. Like, what do you make of that, or what is that? Has that been like a very meta moment for you, or?
It is funny. I mean, a lot of people have their composites that they'll put out. And I mean, there's certainly benefits in being first. It was FEI, it was Formo's system, and then mine before anybody else, like long ago. So that's good. And I do. It probably not I don't know if it's the best measure in a given year, but it's solid. So I don't mind. It's certainly fun to see what other people do with it. The visualizations they come up with that are usually pretty fun. Like no complaints whatsoever, and it's not behind a paywall anymore. So maybe that'll attract more people.
What kind of changes did you make in the off season, if any?
In season, not a whole lot. I'm still kind of like the white whale for me is figuring out how to kind of more quickly adapt on the teams that have like tons of transfers and have more volatile projections in a given year. Like if we're gonna miss a team by a ton, it's probably going to be somebody who had 48 transfers last season, and you just can't really nail them down as much. I'd love to kind of come up with a way to more quickly respond to how those teams are doing. I think that would help a little bit. But for the most part, all the changes are just every year you have a new year of data on how it works when teams are signing almost 20 transfers per season, and that kind of changes volatility. It changes the weights of how much recruiting rankings matter, not as much as they used to, stuff like that. So every offseason I do that, but in season I haven't changed a whole lot.
Who were the most volatile teams this year, like the Colorados or the, JMUs or Indianas or whatever? Who was that this year?
Yeah, well, I mean, Colorado's still up there, but West Virginia, I think, ended up with the absolute most transfers this year because Rich Rodriguez comes in and just guts everything, and he signs a bunch of running backs that I really like, and he usually knows what to do with running backs, but that defense could be an absolute disaster. We'll see. Let's see, they're high on the list. Who else is up there? Louisville's always high on the list. Purdue. Oh yeah, Purdue. Barry Odom, kind of just flipped the entire roster like he did at UNLV a couple years ago, which worked. So we'll see. North Carolina ended up high. Oklahoma State did a ton of work in the spring. And so I think all of those teams, you can't just say, hey, they got a brand new roster, therefore they're going to be good, because plenty aren't. But the range of outcomes is definitely higher for those teams.
It's interesting though, like do you think that the Dion / Indiana, has that given people more belief that these strategies can work? Because I remember like the talk, 2 years ago with Colorado was essentially like they're not going to be good, right? They have all these transfers and they're not going to be good. And now, obviously, you're saying that it's a high variance situation, which I think everyone would agree with. But do you think there's more, people believe more in this model or this strategy?
I think when you have a bad team and you're a brand new coach, I think why wouldn't you? It's going to be different, obviously, if you inherit a team that was like 15th last year or something. But yeah, in the Colorado situation, they really weren't very good that first year, obviously, but they did take some nice step forwards last year, especially actually on defense. Like the offense was still solid, but it was the defense that improved a lot. So I don't know if that was transfers or just a much, much better D coordinator hire, but if you're in a situation, and I mean, our friend Bud Elliott has talked a lot about this too, where, you get hired on December 3rd, signing day for freshmen is like December 15th, but you have commitments that the other guy got, you don't even know them. They're probably half of them are going to transfer. Why wouldn't you just say, you know what, this first year, let's just all portal. Let's just try to get whatever we can find in the portal and then actually try to establish some sort of balance moving forward. I don't blame them. I mean, most of the guys at the top of this list, Rodriguez at West Virginia, Odom at Purdue, Belichick at North Carolina, UCF, Wake Forest, most of the super crazy high transfer teams have new head coaches. So I think that if you're having to do this in like year 5 or in Mike Gundy's case, like year 21, that's probably bad. But first year, why not?
When you look at this year going in, what are the teams? We were talking off air about how there's so much parity between 1 and 7. So is it 1 and 7 or what? Where's the parity? And
it was 7 points between 1 and 12, which
wow.
I was fiddling around, kind of comparing my projections with where the lines were early in the season, and I kind of. It was higher on those top teams, so I kind of fiddled with the bell curve a little bit and brought that down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that seems to be about where it should be, and I don't think I've ever seen that before. Usually it's 2, 3, 4 teams that are within 7 points, and then a pretty big drop off to the rest. So I'm very curious. I mean, you look at the list. Clemson has a known quarterback, not an amazing known quarterback, but they're known. Penn State has a known quarterback. That's it. I mean, the rest of the list: Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Oregon, Michigan, Ole Miss, LSU, Tennessee, or no, LSU's known, but Tennessee, like they're just a ton of teams with new quarterbacks. A lot of them run around a lot. A lot of them are going to get hit a lot. So some of them are going to get hurt. So I kind of get it in terms of uncertainty or knowing for sure who's going to be awesome. Nobody really has earned that distinction this year.
So who do you, when you think about it, the SEC versus the other conferences and whatnot, where do you think that the champion will come out of?
I think the Big Ten probably has the most. Well, I don't know. I think it's basically 3-3, I guess. Big Ten has a very good chance, obviously, with Penn State. I think if I had a poll vote, I'm glad I don't, but if I had a poll vote, I think I would have started with Penn State this year. Both for the the continuity, a third straight redemption tale for a Big Ten team, but just because I do think they have the most knowns and a lot of upside on top of that, more than Clemson. So between them and Ohio State and maybe Oregon or Michigan, the Big Ten's still going to have a really good chance. But SEC always ends up by far the best team in terms of just average SP plus ratings because they don't have as many like surefire terrible teams, and their middle class is much bigger. So that grades out pretty well, but at the top it's kind of 50-50.
And so if you say Penn State first, right? What makes you say that? Like what's the makeup of that team that makes you want to say that they're the top team?
Well, and obviously, we have to see more from Drew Aller. That's he certainly improved last year, and I love Andy Kotelnicki, their offensive coordinator. But really, just what we know about Penn State, even outside of the quarterback position, we know they've got, if not the best running back duo in the country, then one of the two best probably, and they know how to use those guys. They're very physical. The offensive line should be as good as it's been under Franklin. And the defense, they lost Abdul Carter, but they still have Dennis Sutton. They have one surefire pass rusher. They always have a good secondary. They always have good linebackers. And they just traded a very good defensive coordinator for a guy who's probably been the best defensive coordinator in the sport over the last 5-6 years. So that's all awesome. Like, obviously, Aller, we need to know that he has one more gear, and we're not going to know that until like the Ohio State game. But we need to see that. But I think I just trust them a little bit more, considering Ohio State, redshirt freshman quarterback and 2 new coordinators, all these new pieces for everybody else. I think I kind of trust Penn State the most.
Do you think at all about incorporating something like NIL budget into your rankings?
That would be if you could get legit numbers for that. Because we can kind of make estimates and obviously recruiting rankings in a roundabout way, especially with, if you include transfers, you can kind of approximate that. But without knowing everybody's, it would be hard to do. If we knew exactly what everybody was spending, I think a lot of those answers would become pretty clear.
I mean, that's going to be the thing, right? I mean, how long is that going to take to really have, or is that already having an impact? I guess. How would you say that NIL has impacted this top 10 this year versus previous years? And I guess what's that? Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just going to say, like, combining NIL and portal, it's kind of a little bit of both. I do think what we've seen, if anything, at the very top is, number one, certain programs are better at it than others. Like Kirby Smart has not really been all that great with the transfer portal. So he's spending it. He's kind of spent some of his money on the wrong guys from outside the program, at least. But I think, it's been harder for Kirby Smart to build the same level of just extreme depth, especially in the trenches, because those guys will go start for an SEC team slightly lower down. Missouri has a couple former Georgia defensive ends on the roster this year for that, because of exactly that. So it's been harder for him to kind of accumulate and hoard talent. Not that it's going to 60 different schools, but it's going to like 15 different schools. And that's kind of evened out the talent gap at the very, very, very top. There are massive gaps everywhere else you look, but I do think it's offered opportunities for Ole Miss, maybe Texas A&M, like a Tennessee, somebody like that, to really kind of make up ground with the Georgias. So that has been pretty interesting to me. Like obviously, all the talk at a national level, the kind of national reporting about there's a spending cap and all that. There's no cap. There's never, of course, there's not a cap. So, but it has allowed other programs to try to catch up to the Georgias and Alabamas in a certain way, and I think it's kind of worked in a certain way.
So you think that's generally like good for college football? Is that, again, like, and I think about just the lessons of soccer and sports in general, is that salary caps are good for the business of sports,
Right.
but and needed for the business of sports. But in college, obviously, you don't even know what the numbers are, so there's no real
Yeah.
cap. And so right now, this seems like the sport, college football, probably more college basketball, because you don't need quite as many players and
Right.
quite as much money to make an impact. Are we just gonna see? When do we see someone that just completely comes out of nowhere to do this, or is it just because the blue bloods have the resources anyway, so it's always just going to be the blue bloods?
There's going to be a lot of because so far we have certainly not seen, like, yeah, the gap between the number 1 and 10 or 12 or whatever may be closing, but also Ohio State won the national title last year. Like the very, very top hasn't really changed so far. I am really, really curious about Texas Tech, though, because they are the closest thing to what you're saying. Just a team saying, screw it, we're going to spend. They have their billionaire oil investor who's a young guy who used to play Texas Tech football, and he has been writing lots and lots of checks. They signed probably the most expensive, or very, very close to the most expensive transfer class this year. They went out and got Najari Kennedy, the best softball pitcher in the country, and went straight from being below average to within one game of winning the national title. They're trying their best to basically make up the gap with pure money and spending. And we'll see exactly how they get away with that if, in the future, where they're at least pretending to cap it at $20.5 million a year for an athletic department. But, those collectives are still black boxes, and Texas Tech seems to be doing very good work within that black box. So if they they had a lot of ground to make up. I don't think they're going to be amazing this year. They should be in the Big 12 race, but everybody in the Big 12 is in the Big 12 race. But if they turn out to be really, really, really good, I am very curious what the response to that is, because they're probably the best potential usurper on the board.
I like that story because they're like a place that's obviously got some level of culture, and it's geographically desirable, and it's in a conference that wouldn't be that hard to make a national championship run from compared to some of the other conferences. Yeah. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I like that.
Yeah, there is an opportunity in the Big 12 right now. Like obviously, when you're making like much less in terms of playoff money and media rights than the Big 10 or the SEC, it's going to be really hard. But yeah, if you've just got raw spending power there, it's a little hard to restrain it right now. And somebody could try to kind of build a little bit of a dynasty in the Big 12. Historic, like every team has like the same history. So there's a whole bunch of teams that could do that, but Tech is pretty openly trying at the moment.
Rufus, you want to ask any questions of Bill? We're welcoming Rufus Peabody to his Bet the Process podcast, which he is a co-host of, for those of you guys that don't know that.
I am. How are you doing, Bill?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
Good.
So far, Ruf, all we've talked about really is a little bit of any offseason changes, the parity that they have, a little bit of the uncertainty, and then we talked about some of the ways of, like if you think about the Colorado model, does that work? Is that who's the Colorado of this year? So
I mean, do you think that there is more uncertainty in terms of how good a team is going to be going into the season now, and how do you bake that into? Have you changed? Like, are you moving off your priors more quickly?
Well, that was one of the things I was, like in season, I would really like to come up with a way to move off the priors more quickly for specific teams that are transfer heavy. Because obviously you can't just say 2 weeks in, okay, well, SP Plus is obviously wrong about this team. They could have just had a bad 2 weeks and they're about to become the team they're supposed to be. But we do know from the last couple of years that those transfer heavy teams, my model has hit on plenty of them, but the misses, if it's going to miss, it could be a much bigger miss than other teams. And so, yeah, I've been fiddling with that. Haven't come up with anything I like, so I haven't really changed all that much in season. But that is certainly an opportunity right there.
I mean, the problem here, it's a small data problem. It's essentially we know that there is this thing that has changed with all these more transfers, but we don't have a lot of seasons of this. And we have more transfers now than we've ever had this season. And so
Yep.
how do you model this given the fact that like it hasn't really, we don't have enough data to really do it properly?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's one of
And
these, yeah.
we've had more transfers this year, but fewer like ground shaking transfers this year. It's just like everybody traded second stringers, or just they lost their offensive line and brought in a new one, but none of those guys are guaranteed surefire. Like Oregon maybe landed kind of the most highly touted offensive lineman on the board, but they're still not like, it's not like they were all Americans last year. So yeah, it's just I can do more with the number of transfers, but also the quality of transfers really is going kind of all over the place from year to year. So it's weird. It's an interesting place to try to find any sort of trends that you can use.
No, it really is. And in essence, like unless you're, I mean, I think we've talked about this in the past, but like the idea that like, recruiting doesn't just matter for the guy. It's not just the guys that get playing time, because if
Right.
you could have a 3-star that wins the starting job over a 5-star, and the fact that versus a 3-star that had a 2-star like wins the starting job
Right.
against a 2-star, and it means a lot to know that the 3-star beat out the 5-star, right? That's a bet that like all else equal, you would say that's a much better player now. And so
Yeah.
it isn't just about modeling playing time, which makes it really difficult. Like even if you're doing it at the player level, which like Kate and I fiddled with a few years back and basically found no, it's just better to have an idea of just the roster as a whole.
Yeah.
But keeping track of like in essence, like how much are you losing when you lost this 5-star as a transfer who wasn't actually even maybe playing that much.
Right.
And so it becomes this like feels like you're playing Jenga.
Yeah, the good example of Malachi Nelson last year, the 5-star kid from USC who goes to Boise State and loses to a redshirt freshman, Maddox Madsen. That told a couple different stories. Madsen actually turned out to be pretty good, but then also Malachi Moore took him till this week, I think, to win the starting job at UTEP this week. So maybe that was just a miss altogether, but also it maybe hinted at Madsen. So it's you can really just think yourself into circles with this.
Do you think teams anchor too much to how strong a prospect, or like basically to what the recruiting ranking was for a guy coming out of high school in terms of in the transfer portal? Like is it like a top pick like in the Major League Baseball amateur draft generally will get a lot more chances to fail? Like, will this guy, like a 5-star that doesn't play well at one school, generally get like a lot more? Will he be a lot more desired than he should be? Do we have a way
That's
of
a good
evaluating?
question. I know in a lot of cases what coaches will do, like if a redshirt freshman enters the portal, they'll just go with whatever their evaluations were in high school when they were probably recruiting him then. And so they'll kind of have an idea of if this guy enters, we want to jump, even though they have no idea how he maybe practiced the last year. So there is going to be a little of that. But if you got film on him, like, I mean, Malachi Nelson fell to Boise. He wasn't really finding other opportunities in the power conferences, even though he was a pretty recent 5-star recruit. So yeah, that was kind of telling too. I think if there's film on you and stories get out one way or the other, then maybe they're willing to overlook that. But it was probably at least baked into that initial eval. And I do think too with 5-stars in a lot of cases, especially maybe outside the quarterback position, but it's gonna tell you something about just general athletic potential. You might not be meeting that potential, and you might never meet that potential, but it's at least going to tell you, like UNLV bringing in a ton of former blue chippers from all over the place, guys who were 4-star guys, 3 years ago or something. That doesn't say they're going to be good, and their defense was horrific against Idaho State last week. But it tells me that's probably a pretty athletic team at the very least, even if they don't know what they're doing.
Do you think, I mean, I've had this theory that generally in the NFL, you want to draft guys that have had like poor coaching that played well because it means they have more upside. Do you think
Right.
there's that same sort of thing here where like a guy that is transferring away from like a bad program or where you don't think that there was a lot of like good player development, like is there more upside there?
I mean, coaches are catty enough to say, "Well, yeah, but that guy stinks, so he's going to be good under us." Well, Dylan Thieneman at Oregon once again is going to be an interesting example of that because he was good at Purdue. Purdue was abysmal last year and had just a disaster all around him and was not a very well coached team, but he still kind of produced. He was good the year before. So I know Oregon like he was one of the more coveted guys in the portal because even though he probably didn't have nearly as much good film last year, they're guessing that okay, well he's shown it before and he'll show it again under us, but no, I'd say that definitely coaches are confident enough in themselves and catty enough about others that they probably have those thoughts.
Can we go after a few of I asked you a little bit about Alabama and Georgia, I think specifically Alabama, you have rated higher than conventional wisdom does. You have them, what, third and second, sorry, and they're eighth in most polls.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from? And then also in the case of Georgia, what do they have? I would assume that some of their being held back is uncertainty around the quarterback. Is there talent behind him that would be such that there's upside there?
Right. Yeah, I think with Alabama, I was surprised they were as low as they were in the polls. I think maybe there was some anticipation of, it always falls apart for the guy who succeeds, the legend. So we're just jumping on that. And it fell apart late last season. Therefore, he's never going to get it back or whatever. I bet there's a little bit of that in there. And I mean, their offense was an absolute disaster at the end of the season. But that, you can't say Ty Simpson's going to be better than Jalen Milroe because he didn't, anytime Milroe struggled the last couple of years, Simpson got one shot at the starting job, took like 6 sacks against USF. And so if you just want to say like Milroe wasn't good enough and now they're not, the new guy clearly isn't either. Therefore, the offense isn't going to be very good. That's fine. That's logic. But from an SP Plus perspective, what it's seeing is obviously recent history is still going to be pretty friendly to them, even though they weren't at the same level the last couple of years. They were also 4th in SP Plus last year. They were dynamite. Like right before they fell apart, they played just about the best game anybody played all season, beating LSU, I think 42-13. So their high points were still absurdly high. It's why SP Plus liked Alabama and Ole Miss despite their losses last year. And they had a really good defense that returns way more than Alabama normally returns on defense. Bunch of starters, bunch of experience. I know one of the tackles is hurt right now, but just they're overloaded with talent on defense, and I think that's going to be a good unit. So if Ryan Grubb returning, like Kalen DeBoer's never had a bad offense. What happened late last season was very unique for him, much less Alabama. If Ty Simpson's just good, that is a top 3 team. Like, I don't know that he'll be good. Maybe they still don't know what they have there, but I understand why they are where they are in SP Plus, just because they have so much to offer everywhere but the quarterback position, and they've still got star recruits to choose from there too. Right, Georgia. So I was saying Kirby Smart hasn't really mastered the transfer portal. He's got a chance to this year. I'm still not really convinced, but basically I think any reservations about Georgia, I kind of have reservations about Georgia because if you look position to position, there's no real, there's nothing that they're guaranteed to be elite at. Like they obviously have more star recruits to throw at any hole they've got than anybody in the country besides like Bama and Ohio State, but they lost just about everybody from their starting front 7 heading into last year. It wasn't all that great, and then by their standards, and then they lost like 6 out of the 7 again. So they've recycled a whole bunch of guys up front. They're not very proven, and they're going to need, I know like there's been a bunch of talk about like Kristen Miller and some of these other guys, like a whole bunch of guys are going to have to raise their game for it to be a Georgia defense. And then on offensive line wasn't very good, lost 4 starters. The skill core wasn't good enough, didn't give Carson Beck nearly enough last year, and they lost two of their top three receivers, and they're going to be counting on some guys who, like Zachariah Branch from USC, who is a good return, who was a good return man at USC and never really did anything as a receiver. Noah Thomas, the kid they got from Texas A&M, might be kind of a key because he's just a big body and a big target, but they just don't have a lot guaranteed proven stars around Gunnar
So are you kind of doubting your SP Plus rankings on
Well,
that?
I mean, I've been joking the last couple of weeks. I think Texas is overrated, but I thought anybody was overrated at number one because we just have a bunch of 3s and 4s. Georgia's one of those 3s and 4s for sure, but I have doubts about all these teams, and I definitely have doubts about Georgia. Depth and their floor is going to be higher than everybody else's, but in terms of ceiling, I don't really see anything close to what we saw a couple of years ago.
What do you think of Arch Manning?
He's definitely in that class of young new quarterbacks who probably is going to get hit too much. That is one of those things I've been paying more attention to the last couple of years, that sacks to pressures ratio. It's kind of one of what people are finding is one of the only things that really sticks with you when you go from college to pro. It also kind of sticks with you from year to year in college. And obviously Arch only had like 100 dropbacks last year, but basically anytime he got pressured, he was sacked. He seemed to kind of not have the timing down there in terms of trusting your athleticism versus bailing. And he didn't get pressured all that much. He might get pressured more this year because their offensive line's brand new. But that's kind of the biggest question I have. His upside is absurd. Like, he comes in for an injured Quinn Ewers against UTSA and has 70-yard touchdown pass, 70-yard touchdown run, like the greatest small sample game of all time. But then Louisiana Monroe baited him into some mistakes the very next week. And he played it safe against Mississippi State and wasn't like great or terrible against them. Comes in as a change of pace against Georgia and just gets lit up, sacked repeatedly. So I don't know. Like, his upside's obvious, but it's not a guarantee here. If Texas's offensive line doesn't do its job, and the receivers, like the two returning receivers who dropped a lot of passes last year, aren't better. Like, it's not a guarantee. They're definitely one of the 3s and 4s, but I do think they're overrated at 1.
What about Notre Dame? They got all like the new kids of like the pros coming in and whatnot. Is there a reason to believe that they've turned the corner and are truly one of the top 3-4 teams in the country?
What they proved on, like, in the trenches on both lines really last year, where guys would get hurt and you wouldn't notice a difference, and then another guy gets hurt and you don't notice a difference because just guy after guy comes in and does his job. That really, really impressed me. And so, they lose like 3 offensive line starters, 2 defensive line starters, but we already know the backups were just as good. That's a level of trust right there that I don't know if I have in other teams. Secondary is going to be awesome. The fact that they lost Benjamin Morrison to injury, and again, you didn't notice the difference because, what was his name? Leonard Moore, freshman, comes in and thrives. I do trust this team a lot. No, I mean, redshirt freshman quarterback, just like Ohio State, that can always go sideways. But CJ Carr is not going to have to be amazing to kind of run a pretty good show, because Riley Leonard wasn't amazing last year. Granted, Riley Leonard's ass is all over my new book cover. Like, that was a
good shout out. What's it called? Tell everyone what it's called.
Forward Progress: Definitive Guide to the Future of College Football. So that was an ultimate sign of respect on my part, I guess. But he didn't set the bar absurdly high, and they're going to have great running backs. So I like they're definitely one of the contenders. If you want to hold back just because you need to see something from Carr first, I get it. But I do trust them a good amount. I trust them more than Georgia, I think, this year.
It's interesting though, like, when I look at what you're saying, it doesn't bear out in SP Plus. So it's like you have your own rankings and then you have your gut.
I would say, like, yes, but also there, even though in SP Plus, like, Georgia's 3 and Notre Dame 6, they're only separated by a couple points. So It really is close at the top, and change a decimal point here or 1 point here, and the order changes pretty significantly in that range. I will say with SP Plus, Oregon being seventh does make me nervous because they lost a ton. They really had to nail their portal acquisitions, which maybe they did, but that made me a little nervous. But yeah, 1 through 6, especially, like put them in any order you want. There's probably logic for it, and none of them are separated by very much statistically.
I mean, it's so different than what we're used to seeing
Yeah.
with like
Yeah.
basically, I mean, for the last decade, it's been like Alabama and then Alabama, Georgia,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. And I
Ohio.
think, I mean, honestly, if Kirby was better at the portal, like that is part of the deal here. Is certain teams have not hit in the portal as much as others, and obviously he didn't have to hit all that much. He still gets his 5-star freshmen, and most of them stay anyway. But it has, I think, the fact that he hasn't been able to use the portal as well as programs have maybe used against him sometimes. I do think that has made at least a little bit of a difference. And they're merely one of a few title contenders as opposed to the title contender.
Okay, I have one more question, maybe two more questions. One, is there a reason to believe you talk about people that haven't nailed X, Y, or Z? Is there a reason to believe that Clemson's different this year and will be an elite contender?
I mean, if a lot of these quarterbacks don't hit, sure. But
Meaning that Klubnik is that much better than the rest of these guys, and so
right. Like
that's
if
the
a
big
lot of these
differentiator?
quarterbacks drag their teams down, and Klubnik being just good, not
I mean, he's
amazing,
like probably
but just
45 years old, right? At this point, he's been
right.
in college for 10 years.
Well, and that's I've been kind of the resident hater all off season with Clemson. It feels like I know Clemson fans have felt that way, and
Well,
the
didn't they
main
have like a
reason
recruiting
is
class of 15 people too? It's
oh
weird.
really?
Yeah,
I didn't even pick up on that.
it never.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. They do return a lot. I will say
Yeah,
that, like returning production, whatever it means this year. The fact that with in my system, they're at 80% returning production, and normally in recent years that would have ranked like 10th, but it ranks first this time because everybody else
no
lost
more
so much.
COVID. Like,
Right, no more
or very
COVID guys,
little. At least.
and just elite schools losing more guys. Like if you the way I do it, if you bring in a transfer, he counts in the numerator and denominator, but that still means if you lost your quarterback and added somebody else's, it's only 50%. So that is a piece of it, and just overall the national averages are way down compared to where they were in recent years.
So, question: how much of like the returning production, returning starters stuff is continuity versus like just like
Yeah.
essentially inflow, outflow of talent, right?
Well,
Because
that's
you don't get the continuity aspect bringing a transfer in. It's more, if you
right.
think it's more just like having a recruiting class of people that are going to participate the first year for sure. Generally
No,
speaking.
that's definitely why I don't mind. Like I was doing the way I handled transfers is the same way I did 10 years ago when everybody had averaged like 3 transfers. So it wasn't a big
Same.
deal. But I also haven't found a better way to do it, a more effective way to do it. And I think part of the reason for that is like, yeah, there's a ton more guys and you can go import 3,000 receiving yards from elsewhere. But I do think continuity is part of that. It's both pure known production and also the continuity from year to year. So the fact that you get more out of guys who stay, I'm okay with that. And it seems to still work okay. It's just, yeah, the ones that flip the entire roster in an off season that I don't really know what to do with.
Right. And I think you made a good point about the experience part in essence, right? You could have two guys that are they were the same recruiting ranking, but one guy actually played 200 snaps and the other guy didn't play at all. And like there
Yeah.
is some value to that experience.
Yeah, I think so. But with Clemson, it is going to be kind of a grand experiment this year because there was a big deal made. Like Dabo actually dipped into the portal this year. He got 3 guys, and one of them was an FCS receiver. He's apparently very good, but still, like that's still the least of any team really that is thinking about national titles here. But my issue with Clemson is like, how much can you improve in 1 year where in the last 2 years, your average SP plus ranking was 22.5. Last 4 years, it's 18.5. They just haven't been elite. They haven't been anywhere close to elite, really. They've just been good, like good to very good. And I don't know even in this year with massive uncertainty, they're one of those teams in that top 12 that's barely separated by anything. So maybe they can stand out. But I just, that's a lot of ground to make up in 1 year. And I think they're going to need other teams to fail in their kind of rebuilding and retooling jobs for them to rise very high. I like the receivers, but they didn't throw downfield all year until they were down 2 touchdowns against Texas. They haven't thrown downfield in years. The defense should improve under Tom Allen, but even with all those future pros on the D line, they had a terrible run defense last year. So, yeah, I mean, I think they'll improve. I just think they improved to like 10th, not, or what I have them at 8th, like 8th to 12. Oh no, it is 10th. It is 10th. So somewhere 8 to 12, not like serious national title contender.
Okay, who's your national title pick with the odds as they are, I guess, and I can tell you what.
Well, yeah. Let me pull up the latest here to make sure.
I mean, shouldn't we be like looking at someone in that 11 to 14 range as the where we want to try to make some.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't spend. I'm not going to tell anybody to spend money on
like what Tennessee at 44 to 1 or Ole Miss last year. Like what's Ole Miss right now? Ole Miss is 45. Ole Miss is 45 to 1.
Yeah, so looking at but you're right. Like lop off the first 4 to 6 teams. Even Alabama's up to like 5th on the list, which is disappointing. But looking at that next kind of game, I do think there's some maybe value in Notre Dame. I don't know. That's probably right.
They're like 10 to 1 though, so they're right.
That's about right for them.
Yeah.
I honestly, telling people to spend their money on Texas A&M it feels very cruel and like reduces my credibility. But when I have my series of pieces that I write each year, and I enjoy writing them because they kind of tell me what I think. I don't always know what I think until I sketch them out. And one of the things I do is it's called the ifs list. Like how many ifs does it take for me to turn your team into one of the title favorites? Like with Penn State, like Drew Aller has one more gear and the receivers are the new transfer receivers do their jobs. Well, that's all it really takes for them to be an absolute surefire title contender. So they didn't have very many. The one team that I surprised myself on was I had as many for Texas A&M as I did for like Georgia and Ohio State. They return a lot in this year where everybody has a brand new offensive line. They don't. They have a very, very big, very, very experienced offensive line that didn't dominate everybody, but in certain games against like LSU and Missouri, they got a rhythm and just absolutely ran over other teams. So the fact that Marcel Reed, their quarterback, we know he's solid. We don't really know if he's got anything more than solid, but they're going to have a dynamite run game. They got a bunch of new receivers. The defense, the secondary was kind of hit or miss last year, but it was really young and they brought all those guys back. They only need a couple D-line transfers to hit for me to really, really, really like them. And I did not expect that at all. That surprised me a little bit. They've got, Mike Elko did great things at Duke. And now he's got a lot more talent to work with. Maybe he's kind of getting his culture, the last culture flushed out a little bit and his culture in there. And man, I think there's value there. And I hate saying that because A&M has disappointed people a million times.
Rufus, you got any last questions for Bill?
Only the most nerdiest of questions, so I think I'm good.
All right, Bill, thanks for joining us. Obviously, we'll have you on again at some point during the season. I'll make sure I'll give you some major shout outs on the TK show this week, or sorry, not this week, this season. So your friends
my buddies will be listening.
Yeah, that's why I do it. So we'll get you on that show at some point, and that will be the ultimate, right?
Yeah, that'll make my friends' heads explode.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Take care.
Bet the process.